Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Relaxation and welcome to another Mists of Pandaria preview of the heroic dungeons in the coming expansion. And today we're having a look at heroic Scholomance, and the first boss in this encounter is going to be Instructor Chillheart. And the first thing you're going to notice in this clip is that two of our DPS and our healer actually end up dying to the ice wall, spawning right on top of them. So that's definitely the first note I want to make. Make sure you're not pulling the boss from behind her, but from actually in front, otherwise you're actually going to end up dying. So now that that's taken care of, let's get down to the actual boss mechanic. And yes, me and the tank does manage to solo this. Thankfully, we have a couple of interesting mechanics, such as the Monk Swin the White Tiger being able to taunt the boss, and my Stampede Pets being able to taunt the boss, making us a kill with a couple of tricks and hidden things, I suppose. Let's get right down to it. The first ability is obviously the ice wall. The closer it moves, the closer you are to death, so it's about a race of time until you actually die to the ice wall, and you should kill her before it reaches the end of the room. Now after that you have Ice Wrath. Ice Wrath puts a debuff on a random player, dealing 50k frost damage to anyone standing within 2 yards of the actual player, so people just spread out. She also has Rack Soul, which puts a debuff on the player. This debuff does 15k shadow damage every second for 10 seconds, and will jump to another player when it expires, but because we were only 2 players here, we didn't actually get to see that. Other than that, she also has the ability called Frigid Grasp, where she will summon an ice patch near a random player's location and explode it for a lot of frost damage. Just move out there. Now, once you have destroyed Instructor Chillheart's physical form, she will retreat to her phylactery, and the books around the room from the bookshelves will come alive, and there are 3 kinds of books. The first one is the Anarchist Arcanist, which shoots out arcane bombs, which will detonate in a 2-yard radius around it, dealing arcane damage, so just don't stay in that. After that we have Antonidas' Self-Help Guide to Standing in Fire, which is a book of fire that will basically float around the room and dealing fire damage to anything it touches. The last book is Wanda's Colossal Book of Shadow Puppets, which will be throwing out shadow bolts towards random players for 25k damage roughly. Overall, this fight isn't actually that hard, unless of course you have half your group dies to the ice wall, and you have to rely on your tank and your last remaining DPS to actually finish the job. I still think we're pretty pro finishing the job, but then again, there was some mechanic that we kind of skipped with the Rack Soul mechanic that we didn't quite get to see. So I suppose that's unfortunate. But then again, base is beta, and soon we will not have this issue any longer. So after defeating Instructor Chillheart's phylactery, you'll get your loot. The next boss we're going to be having a look at is Jandis Barrow, and she also has a couple of abilities that makes her quite unique. First off is Wondrous Rapidity, where she will fire out arcane damage cones in front of her near the tank where the tank is facing, dealing a lot of arcane damage. The only person who should be tanking this is the tank. Pretty obvious, isn't it? Otherwise, you should just move away from this. It's very easy to spot. Now, the next ability that is increasingly difficult will be the Gravity Flux, which, if you touch it, you'll be flung about the room and take an increasing amount of shadow damage and go blind for a sec. Now, what you're seeing here is the Phantasmal Images mechanic of Jandis. At 66% at 33% health, Jandis will go into 1 million copies around the room. Not quite 1 million, but you get the idea. Defeating a wrong illusion, an illusion of the actual boss, will deal 30k arcane damage to all enemies, causing a flashbang. Now, this mechanic is kind of broken. It's not actually in the beta yet. We didn't seem to take that much damage from it, so I don't think it's quite in the beta yet. At the same time, each copy will be doing a Whirl of Illusion, dealing about 25k arcane damage with an arcane missile to random players each second. This is easily healable from what we saw, but combined with the flashbang and killing copies too fast, it might be a problem in the end. We didn't have too much problem killing this boss. It's severely undertuned at the moment, and we don't quite think that the flashbang mechanic is implemented, making this a lot easier than it actually should be. Overall, still a really nice, visually interesting fight, and I hope to see it tuned in the future. Once you find the real Jandis Barrow among the copies, all other copies will disappear, and the fight will continue as normal. And after punching him about a bit, you will get your loot as well. Moving on, third boss, Rattlego. How many of you guys remember this guy from the original Scholomance? Well, he's back, and this time he's a bit more of a pain in the ass. The first thing you'll notice is the bone piles scattered throughout the room. Players can actually interact with the bone piles and gain a stack of bone armor. This bone armor will prevent one bone spike that Rattlego frequently casts to be completely absorbed. If you don't have a stack of bone armor, you will take out a huge amount of damage and actually be knocked back a severe distance. Now, to prevent you from gaining access to the bone piles easily, there are small soul flame patches that will occasionally light on fire, growing in size, covering the entire pile of bone, preventing you from actually grabbing someone unless you want to take a huge amount of damage. So just be aware of that. In addition to the bone spike, the soul flame, and the bone piles around the room, Rattlego also has an ability called Rusting, where every time he does a successful melee hit onto the tank, he will gain 15% increased damage, but lower his attack speed and movement speed by 5%. This effect can stack indefinitely as far as we're concerned, and once you start reaching 10 stacks and above, it's important that your tank starts kiting him around the room. Other than that, the fight is quite simple. Just don't stand in the fire and be careful, and make sure you always have a stack of bone armor up, since the buff lasts for 5 minutes. Preventing the bone spike damage will really help out your healer. Fourth boss is none other than Lilith boss herself. Lilith boss has 3 phases. The first one, Dark Master Gatling will mind control her to attack you. She has 3 different abilities in this form. First is Shadow Shift, where Lilith will leap onto a random player and strike them for 60k shadow damage to all players within 8 yards of the targeted player. Spreading out should pretty much counter unnecessary damage. In addition to this, Lilith boss will also gather dark powers to pull you all towards her, called Death's Grasp. After performing Death's Grasp, Lilith will put on Dark Blaze on every single player, allowing them to leave a trail of dark fire on their player's location every time they move, inflicting 10k fire damage every 0.5 seconds you stand in it. I recommend moving to the outskirts of the room and then leaving the fire patches there to avoid unnecessary damage. When Lilith's health reaches 60%, her will break, and Dark Master Gatling forcefully rips her anguished soul from her physical body, and then commands that soul to attack the players, and the soul itself has 3 different abilities. First up is Blazing Soul, where Lilith's soul will continually, periodically inflict 15k fire damage to all players in the room. In addition to this, she also has Unleashed Anguish. For every melee strike, Lilith's Soul will unleash another barrage of Blazing Soul. However, the movement speed of Lilith's Soul is significantly reduced in this state. The third and most important ability is Fixate Anger, where Lilith's Soul will fixate on a random player and will only attempt to attack that player. This means that you will often have to end up kiting her around, especially if you're the healer or around the random non-tanky DPS, such as any non-plate DPS. When Lilith's Soul reaches 1% health, Lilith's Soul fades into the spirit realm and cannot be attacked, but will continue throughout the encounter to do her abilities. Lilith boss will now attack you along with her soul, retaining all her original abilities from the first phase. The only difference now is that her soul is in the mix. Upon reaching 1% remaining health, Lillian's physical body will break free from Dark Master Gatling's control and wound the Necromancer, allowing him to retreat, and she will leave you to finish the job. Now we move on to the last boss, Dark Master Gatling. And he is quite interesting, to say the least. He retains most of his abilities from the original Scholomance, which is, first off, he has an Incinerate, which is his main cast nuke, which deals 35k fire damage to his main target. He also has Emulate, which acts like Emulate would. He first deals 35k fire damage and then another 10k additional fire damage every 3 seconds for 21 seconds. Gatling also has an ability called Rise, where he will call to zombies, failed students of his. While channeling this spell, he will continuously summon monsters and zombies around the room. In addition, he will take 50% less damage while channeling this spell. The DPS should quickly focus down all the failed subjects as much as possible with their AoE abilities. In addition to this, he also has the Harsh Lesson mechanic, where he will target a random player and throw them into one of his study rooms for a harsh lesson. There are 2 possible ways to actually go through the Harsh Lesson session. If you're a DPS or the tank, you'll be thrown into a room filled with expired test subjects. The Dark Master keeps these former test subjects in their nearby rooms and they attack anyone who enters their room. Simply clear the room of the expired test subjects and you'll be back into the fight no problem. If you are the healer, however, you will be coming across the fresh test subjects. Each test subject suffers from explosive pain, a debuff ticking for damage over time. In order to get out the room, you must simply heal through or dispel all the explosive pains from all the test subjects. Pretty easy, pretty standard and pretty straightforward. Well guys, this has been it for me, and this has been the preview of Heroic Scholomance. Thank you very much for watching. My name's been Relaxation, and wow, Mists of Pandaria, the 25th of December release? I don't think anyone saw that coming. And then, just in case I said December, I did meant September. Anyways guys, I'll see you next time, and I'll see you in the mists.